Hello and welcome to another video. So on this episode we're going to talk about depression and about tools and ways in which you can cope with it, to live with it, and to ultimately overcome it, or to more aptly put it, to develop a healthy relationship with it, because ultimately there is this stigma attached to it, this sort of resistance, this sort of separation that we ultimately try to, this sort of barrier between the self and the emotion of depression. And this is this barrier that causes the tension. So everyone will have moments of depression, periods of depression, to lesser or greater extents, but it is the individual that allows it, to accept it, to integrate it into themselves, to create this unity within themselves that allows them to be at harmony with it, to be at harmony with themselves, and to ultimately live their lives in an accepting relationship with it. Because throughout your life, throughout everyone's life, there are going to be ebbs and flows, ups and downs. So it is important to accept that you're going to feel depressed, you're going to feel low, you're going to feel sad throughout your life, to greater or lesser extents, and also will be times where you're going to feel happy and harmonious and filled with joy. Let's not forget that side. But for the purpose of this video, we're going to focus on periods of depression, because they're equally as important. And culturally and societally, I don't think there's a productive or a healthy relationship with this natural phenomenon, this natural emotion, this natural feeling which we all have from time to time, and causes us pain. Let's be honest, it hurts, it's suffering, it calls for periods of introspection and real consideration of the self. It really puts you at a, you can be having great friendship, developing great friendships, a great relationship, great business, great job, but all of a sudden, if you come across this emotion, this depression, this sadness, this sort of despair, this feeling of entering a bottomless pit, it can feel very overwhelming, especially if you're new to it. There are some people that go throughout their entire lives sort of forever in this state, because they learn to live with it. They kind of become comfortable in this state, and rather than sort of contextualizing it and integrating it into their psychology, they kind of just sort of live with it in this distant and cold relationship where it's sort of, they've fragmented themselves, they live with it, but it's this dual conflict rather than this holistic unity of ebb and flow, happiness, sadness, the natural order of reality, the natural order of consciousness, the natural order of your emotions. So it's important to not want to fight these natural emotions. It's very easy and quick, or society is very quick to sort of punish or to distance themselves from these emotions. It's very difficult to actually work with them, because in society it's kind of, you've got depression, you need medication. When I a few years back, when I was going through a very tough period, and I was very, when I first came into contact with these emotions in a very severe way. Before, it was, I had moments, but I could kind of mitigate those emotions through sorts of alcohol and drugs and escapism and career and relationships, and it got me so far to a breaking point where those escapisms I was substituting a healthy, holistic relationship with myself through drugs, through career, through relationships, and kind of anything to kind of distance myself. As I said earlier, I was in a dualistic, resistant type relationship with myself. I'd fragmented myself into two pieces, and then that's the source of the pain. It's this conflict, this internal struggle, this oppositions of perspectives between the good and the bad, or to more aptly put it, the perceived good and the perceived bad, which the ego will try to pigeonhole your emotions into these good and bad, which is a very logical interpretation. I mean, it makes complete sense. Happiness is a good emotion, and then sadness on the other side is a bad emotion. It makes sense. Obviously, it makes sense. But our emotions and our consciousness doesn't fit into the realm of logic and reason. It's very much an abstract form. It very much invites you and puts you in a state of surrender. You have to surrender to it, and the opposite to that is resistance. My form of resistance, which I'm sure a lot of people in the world will relate to, which is, as I said, it was, if I focus all my attention on the career, or if I take enough drugs, or if I fill my time, as much as my time, with friends or in relationships, then I won't have to. It's almost like I believed that I could just sort of put it aside, but that's not accepting. That's resisting, and these periods of depression will require you to surrender to it, because you're no longer at that point. You're no longer in the domain of the intellect, and that's the problem. You go into, I went into when I had reached a real severe crossroads. Because I was so overwhelmed, and it was a form of depression I'd never come in contact with before, a form in which I entered the bottomless pit, in the sense that there was no bottom. It was constant free fall, and that was terrifying. I mean, I had no context for it. I had no understanding of it, because before I solved my emotional problems, intellectually, with the methods I've explained. But with this, there was no remedy. There was no intellectual remedy. I was in a free fall. It was terrifying. It was terrifying is the most apt way to describe it. So I go to a doctor to begin with, to seek help, and it's a case of what medication to put you on. And so I left that surgery feeling more helpless than before, because I'd taken drugs before for many years to solve my issues, and now I went to doctor's surgery, and I was being prescribed more drugs. So I was very much feeling I was on my own in this domain, in this realm, and on this path, because in society, that's the sort of diagnostic. It's very much, we'll deal with it intellectually, we'll deal with it medicinally. So I'm here to provide an alternative perspective. I mean, you can use medication, in a short term. I believe there's moments that can help, because if you're in survival mode and you're not strong enough yet, or it's not the correct time on your personal journey to face your problems directly, not through some intermediate substance, then okay. But I would firmly suggest long term that you have at least the intention to at some point confront these unheard stories, emotions, because it's an unheard story. We all of us carry the weight of our past all the time. It's always there lurking, and in some moments, sometimes external situations will trigger the emotional recall and bring that unheard story to the forefront, that narrative of, I'm unworthy, I'm suffering, I am pain, I am, victim, these sorts of narratives, because they very much are a narrative. The ego will work in narrative form, and we remember these narratives, and they're ingrained in our psyche, and they play out always subtly. Sometimes they're louder, sometimes they're quieter, and it's the weight of these stories. If we don't surrender to them, accept them, and integrate them, that they become heavy, and they become so loud and so overwhelming that they form in this, we call it depression, but it's just a label ultimately for emotions we can't contain, because depression is just a label. Ultimately we're dealing with emotions, which is a very abstract realm around the intellect. Will never ever pin down. I mean, we try to, because obviously we do our best with our limited intellect, which of course has its uses, but in the domain of emotion and emotional health, surrendering, accepting and integrating is the only path. And it's through this process that you can aim to accept who you are and what you've been through, and with those lessons try to form a healthy direction moving forwards, because otherwise those unheard stories will play out over and over and over again as you move forward in your life. And if you don't recognize the story that's playing out in your life, has been playing out in your life, and continues to play out in your life, and if depression, the story, the symptom of the story, isn't alarming you or awakening you to this pattern, to this karmic pattern, then it will continue to play out, because ultimately it's a warning sign, it's a signal saying something's not right. There's a story, an unhealthy story, an unaligned story, just to love, to harmony. It's ultimately disorderly story has been initiated at an earlier part of your life, through some, as we all have when we're younger, a traumatic event. When we're kids and we're children, we don't have a filter system. We're very much sponges. We sort of soak in unconsciously bad habits, and we have good and bad times. We don't differentiate, we just soak it all in. And so because we don't have the awareness and perception of reality at a young age, we kind of just soak in all these unhealthy stories. And if we don't at some point in our lives listen to them, integrate them, accept them, then we will always be a prisoner of those stories rather than creating our own healthy stories. So I would invite you through this process of surrendering, opening yourself up to moments of depression, with the aim that you are trying to rewrite the story that is playing out, that has played out and is playing out, and to really step into your life and make your voice heard, and to recreate your life moving forward. So I wish you all the best. It is an ongoing process, of course. It is something that isn't, because it isn't the intellect where it's a start and the beginning. Is this constant eternal process of rejuvenation, of birth and death, and there is no beginning, there is no end. It will be a constant. So to be present in that reality, and to not see it as beginning, end, good, bad, to see it holistically as a unified process eternally in the moment, will allow you to not be in this restrictive realm of the intellect, seeing it as either one thing or another thing. It will allow you to see the situation in its totality and allow you to process it as such. So good luck on your journey. I wish you all the best. Bye.